We get into the weeds with Jake Crain of Crain and Company and talk analytics and football strategy in the modern world. And we also discuss which SEC coach owns a waterbed.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Steven Willis, host of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. He is Jake Crain, host of Crain and Company. Well, co-host of Crain and Company. How's the show doing, Greg? Jake?
Oh man, it's doing unbelievable. We've never had better numbers than we had this past season, and even we talk a little bit of NFL as well. So we did a live stream for the College Football National Championship game. Got about 300,000 views on that. So it's going good. Got a brand new baby girl, so want to get as many views as possible so I can buy her all the things, including a wedding eventually. Oh no. When yes. Of course, when I arrange the marriage to somebody that I feel is fit.
Of course, that's exactly how it has to go. And speaking of you doing NFL and all that, I am of the opinions in that game that analytics cost Buffalo that game, what Sean McDermott and the coaching decisions did. Buffalo chasing points inexplicably in the second quarter to the point where by the end of the day, the Chiefs just needed to score a touchdown and get a 2-point conversion and tie in a game that they should have been up 10 points. Mm-hmm. I am very much anti-analytics. And this is my thought, Jack. You do not find teams that rely heavy on analytics that win big games. You're going to win some. You're going to pop up and get somebody at some point, but you're not going to win the big game if you're constantly doing the analytics. If you look at Ole Miss, for example, Lane Kiffin is famous for his analytics, but against Georgia, he did not use them, and they just took Georgia off the field that day. Mm-hmm. But against Florida, against LSU, against Kentucky, they all involved fourth down attempts by Ole Miss of less than 2 yards in the red zone in one-score games. If Ole Miss didn't go by analytics, they're probably 12-0 this season.
Yeah, and look, I think there's value in knowing the situation, right? There's just like playing blackjack. There's value in knowing what to do in certain circumstances and how to play. But to me, I think it is these players are not robots. They're not computers. They're not calculators. We're not trying to write an algorithm. We're not trying to write a software program. These are human beings. I think a lot of it you have to go off feel, right? I think the best coaches go off feel. And some people don't like the way that Dan Campbell is super aggressive. But Dan Campbell, I don't think, looks at the analytics and says, oh, we need to go for it. He looks at his team. You look at a guy like Spags, the defensive coordinator for the Chiefs. Analytically, they do some things, but he goes off feel and instinct because it's not just what you call, it's when you call it. So when you look at a team that maybe that day you're bullying guys up front and you should go for it. It does make sense. Maybe you're struggling to run the ball and the analytics, which for some reason, it seems like the analytics always say go for it. Mm-hmm. Very rarely does that graphic pop up and it's like, you should take the points. But you have to have a feel of the game, not only your players, but the other team as well. Where are their strengths? Where are their weaknesses? You can't just, if it was easy enough to just look at a piece of paper and have that tell you what to do every time, it would make coaching a lot easier and more guys who use just strictly analytics would win more games. So I'm with you. Sometimes in the heat of the moment, when you can look in your guys' eyes, you're like, damn it, let's go for it. Or you know what? Hey, we've been struggling to run the ball a little bit. It's early in the game. Let's take the points. The one that blows my mind, Steven, that I still, and I've had people try and explain it to me, other guys that I respect try and explain it to me, and I still don't believe you, is when you're down 14, and you see this in the NFL all the time. And let's say you're down 14 in the third quarter, and you score that first touchdown and then go for 2. The analytics say it's smart to go for 2 to cut it to a 6-point lead. So therefore, if you score a touchdown and kick an extra point, you win the game. Dude, what do you mean? Why would I do that? Now, if I don't get the 2-point conversion, I have to go for 2. How about this? How about we're down 14, I score a touchdown, I kick the extra point, especially in college when it's pretty much a layup compared to the NFL. And then when I score again, I can make the decision if there's a little or no time on the clock. Hey, we're on the road. Let's get this 2-point conversion. If we get it, we win. We get out of here. If not, we don't. Or, hey, we're at home. We feel like we can outlast these guys. Let's kick the extra point. I can't stand some of the coaching decisions that we're seeing. I mean, Steven, we're having coaches that are trying, instead of kicking extra points to go up 9, right, in certain situations, are going for 2. How many times has Nick Sirianni and the Eagles had a chance to make it a 2-score game and decided to go for 2 to make it 10 instead of 9? Dude, there's not a 9-point sequence of events that can happen after you score a touchdown. It baffles me, man.
Yeah, there's 2 things. First of all, I think that the quote analytics is being used by a crutch and excuse for people, so we can say, oh, that we didn't work when we went for it, but the book said go for it. You hear that all the time going on. But also in analytics, the computer, the algorithm, all of that stuff, they can't account for momentum because it is a real thing in football over and over. It'll tell you on a piece of paper, it is okay to go for it every time. Like if you went for it 3 out or 5 times in a game, it's okay to miss it 3 times if you get 2 of those, because you're going to score more points per series if you do the other one. But what they don't account for is those 3 that you missed. You had a momentum jump by the other team and they went down and scored a touchdown. You ended up losing the game.
Yeah, it doesn't show momentum and it doesn't show feel of the game. I'll give you another great example. A couple years ago, I don't know, you may remember this, you may not. There was that high school, I think it was in Arkansas, that just went for every 4th down and kicked an onside kick every time on kickoff. And for like a couple years, he was like winning, but you didn't realize that his team was just a lot better than all the other teams. And some people were like, hey, we need to try this in college. So the guy gets hired at a smaller college and tries it.
Presbyterian, I think.
Yeah. And it doesn't work. Like I get knowing the situation. I'll use the blackjack example again. All right. I got a soft 17, depending on what the dealer has. Right? The book says do this, book says do that. Do I double right here? I'd like to know what the analytics say, but I'm going to go off feel. I think that's the best way to go about it. And, I would rather, as crazy, and maybe it's because I'm a defensive guy, I like taking the points. I don't like chasing points early. When you get a chance to score. So that's, maybe that's just me, but at the end of the day, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, they're trying, like Buffalo trying to cut it to a 3-point game before halftime. You don't know what next time you get the ball, what the score is going to be.
Yeah, it's too early. Don't chase.
Yeah. And when you do that, you get a momentum bump for the other team. I hate it because I do believe that momentum is an absolute real thing.
Oh, it's 100% a real thing. A lot of coaches call plays off momentum. So if I'm going to call schematical plays off momentum, I'm going to make decisions on whether or not to go for it or decide what to do based on momentum, because it's 100% a real thing.
Yeah. And places like LSU is the most momentum-based program in the Southeastern Conference. When things are going good at LSU, they go great during a ball game, but they can also hit the valleys as well. They kind of ride the roller coaster.
For sure.
So anyway, when we come back, we are going to talk to Jake Crain about which coach in the SEC could own a waterbed. What type of beds do you think the coaches in the SEC have? We're just going to have a discussion and have a good time. But right now, I need to tell you about Game Time. Attending NFL playoff games is an experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, and the camaraderie with other fans is absolutely unmatched. I'll never forget the thrill of watching my favorite team clinch a playoff victory live. It's a moment I'll cherish forever. This year, Game Time makes it easier to create those unforgettable memories with their new feature, Game Time Picks. It cuts through the clutter and shows you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what really matters, actually being at the game. I recently used Game Time Picks to snag tickets for an upcoming playoff game. It was a breeze. I found a super deal that gave me an amazing value for incredible seats. And one of my favorite features is the fact that I can preview the seat before I buy it. So helpful. And with their all-in prices, there were no surprise fees at checkout. And Game Time's guarantee gave me a total peace of mind knowing that my tickets are secured and will be delivered on time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account or redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So we're here with Jake Crain talking about, well, we did a nice little piece on analytics in the first part of the show. We're going to get a little bit more lighthearted right now. And I'm on this SEC group chat with all the Locked On hosts, and it's thumping right now for what can happen. And one of the questions that everybody's debating is which SEC coach owned a waterbed or perhaps owns one now. And I started thinking about it, and I mean, the obvious answer on that one would be like, everybody's making jokes about Hugh Freeze and Lane and all of that, but I don't think so. I'm of the opinion that like Elijah Drinkwitz or Shane Beamer, that's kind of the direction that I would go on this.
Yeah, look, in situations like this, it always ends up being the guy you didn't think it was. It was like a murder mystery, right? Or like Scooby-Doo. It's like you reveal it, then you're like, oh, I didn't realize it was him. And you know, when you were talking about that a second ago, there's just one name that keeps flashing up to me, and it's Sam Pittman. I just think if any SEC coach has a waterbed, it's Sam Pittman. And you know what? He's probably had the same waterbed since waterbeds were cool, which is like what, like 30 years ago, whatever. I remember my uncle, who lives in Mississippi, had a waterbed. When I was a kid, it was the coolest thing ever. It was amazing. It's like when I watched SpaceX. It's like they got water in the bed, but it's not a pool. It just feels like Sam Pittman. I can just see him there smoking a cig, got a beer cracked on the side, just sitting on the waterbed, you know, watching highlights, eating Cheetos, man. Like it just makes sense to me. You brought up Shane Beamer. I think Shane is probably more Tempur-Pedic, right? Like you got the lumbar adjustments on each side. You can make one hot, one cold, or both hot. I just feel like Sam Pittman is in the waterbed and gravity is probably just really taking effect, especially if it's the same one. He may be just sitting in shallow water right now.
And Kirby probably has the most expensive, highest rated bed on the market.
Kirby's just probably got a throne that turns into a bed. It's just, you just hit a button and it goes from like the Iron Throne to just turns into a bed. And then, you know, so there's some sort of like surround sound or like a huge screen opens up with a TV. That I think Kirby's just going to have the top of the top.
And Brian Kelly would be like a piece that he bought in like Vermont, but he tells everybody he got in like
no, it's like
Lafayette.
Yeah. He's got like a hunting themed room, and he's got like a 10-point, you know, mount that sits over it that he tells everybody he killed, but he really just found when he bought one of those storage things like off that Storage Wars show.
Sounds about right. And like I think the
killed it with a knife.
Yeah, like the weird shaped bed game. If you're thinking about that, who would have the weird shaped bed? I think it would be a surprise, like Mark Stoops or Mike Elko would. I feel
like Mark Stoops just may sleep on concrete. I don't know if Mark Stoops has any emotions, like other than just upset. Like that's the only emotion. I would say shaped bed. I would think Drinkowitz would have like the state of Missouri shaped bed, which actually, if you look at the way Missouri's shaped, wouldn't be that bad, especially if it was vertical. I don't know. Drinkowitz, I think, probably has a disco ball in there. Who knows? It probably. I just can't get over this Sam Pittman in the water. That image is. I'm sorry, I seared that into everybody's mind, but like now you have to. I thought it, so now you have to see it too.
Yes, absolutely. And like Clark Lee just has a door that walks in and just goes sleep mode.
Yeah, no, Clark Lee has one of those like rooms. It's like Bill Gates' house where like the temperature and the color in the room depends on your mood. Like when you walk in, I just feel like he just sits in a wheelchair and puts that like Professor X helmet on and like starts looking at ways to like put a team together out of nothing. And then he let Mark Byington use it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Who else have we missed on that? Jeff Lebby. That's like a hunting lodge. That's like a hammock.
No, I was just thinking hammock. I was 100% just thinking hammock. I'm going through all the SEC coaches in my mind. I'm just wondering what Sark has. Like, what would Steve Sarkisian have as a bed in his room? I think after the problems he had, maybe his room's just really simple. Maybe it's just a really simple room, you know, king. I'm wondering who has like the shack size bed though. like the bed that's the side of the room. I could take a guess. Maybe it's Lane, and I'm not even throwing shade, but I could see Lane having just one of those humongous beds that you could basically just live on.
Sark could have something with like just a random staircase that goes up to an elevated bed.
Yeah, like that sits over the top of the city of Austin. Like he can just look out. No, that makes sense. It's got like Lamborghini leather on the outside of it. I could see it.
Yeah, it's kind of Bond villain vibes.
For sure. Oh, he's got heavy Bond. But I will say though, Sark personality wise, he plays it pretty close to the vest. He doesn't make waves. He doesn't talk trash. But those are the ones you got to worry about, right? Those are the ones that all of a sudden you realize has been, hiding plutonium in their basement all this time, just when nobody was thinking. Yeah, it's exactly right.
So, yeah, it's pretty interesting. All right. So, real quick before I let you go today, other than the national championship and all of that, what do you think the stories of college football season this year was?
Well, there's obviously a lot. You got to look at the narrative of the Big Ten and, back-to-back national championship game, winning teams, games where, you look at who was in them. An SEC team wasn't represented in the national title game. And I think that there's a lot of overreaction to, oh, no, the SEC is going to fall off and this, that, and the other. I don't think you can dominate college football the way that the SEC did from – really 2005 and until, 2022. You got 7 straight national titles, 5 different teams win a national title. I don't think you can a conference can't monopolize the sport like the SEC did. I mean, you can't monopolize the team anymore, really, when you look at it. I know Ohio State spent $20 million on a roster, but, they had to play in the first round of the college football playoff. So if you're an SEC fan out there and you think, oh, no, the SEC is going to fall into the dark ages, that's not going to happen. They're not going to dominate like they used to. I don't think anybody is. So I think that was one big story. I mean, we can obviously talk about NIL and the transfer portal and this and that. But, one of the stories that I think when you look at you guys at Ole Miss is, was this the biggest missed opportunity that Ole Miss has had in a long time? And not to be negative, but I think a lot of y'all out there will agree with me. I mean, when you look at the schedule, when you look at the roster, and a lot of it's on the line of scrimmage, that's where if I'm an Ole Miss fan, I'd be the most worried this next year. I know Simmons hasn't been out there a lot. He's shown some good things. I don't really worry about Lane Kiffin at the skill position. You got to retool the offensive line. You lose Nolan, Pegues, Ivy, and Princely. I know that you got some guys, coming back. I mean, Xavier's a good player. You got some transfers, including Princely's, I think, little brother coming in from Nebraska. But was this the biggest missed opportunity? And how can Ole Miss bounce back this next season as well? So, look, it's going to be a fight. It's always a fight. I'm just very intrigued to see which teams, continue to load up in the transfer portal, and which teams are going to kind of stick to that high school development route.
Yeah, and I do have one question before I let you go. I do think that helmet communication, everybody thought the offense was going to have an advantage this year with helmet communication, but I do think the helmet communication has basically eliminated the effectiveness of tempo. And I think that offenses like Josh Heupel and Lane Kiffin that are so tempo prevalent, I think the helmet communication kind of neutralized that. And I'm curious to know how Lane is going to adapt, because it might wait to where you're not substituting, but you're not snapping the ball until after 15 seconds when the thing cuts off, shift to a different formation. I think Brandon Olson from Locked On Gators brought this up. I think that's the next level of the game.
Yeah, well, we had a ton of people ask about, helmet communication and how bad it's going to be for the defense. And I kept telling people the defense can talk to the coach too. Like if they just gave the helmet communication to the offense and not the defense, that would be huge. But to your point, what I think you're going to see is that some of these tempo teams are going to stop relying on the helmet communication as much and kind of go back to the old school way. Now, that doesn't mean you don't use it or you can't be talking while you're doing it. But at the end of the day, even with the helmet communication, if you don't huddle, you still have to signal. Like you can't, you don't have time to sit here and the quarterback to walk and tell every wide receiver, hey, what to do. Here's the play. Here's the play. He can bark it at the offensive line. But if you're going to go fast, you're going to still have to do it the old school way. Where I think the helmet communication, really comes into effect is being able to get the 2 plays in quicker when you feel good enough about your quarterback having 2 plays to give him that check depending on what he sees. So if you want to go fast, you can still go fast. You just got to do it the old school way. But even if you're going fast with the helmet communication, somebody's still got to signal to the wide receivers if you don't huddle. So I was really interested to see if the helmet communication would lead to more teams huddling, right? As opposed to, having to signal in individually like we did when I was at South, or you see a lot of teams do. You see it on defense as well. Different position coaches signaling to different levels of the defense. So I'll be interested to see if we kind of go back in time a little bit for some of these teams that are going fast.
Yeah, I think that college football right now is trending more towards Georgia Tech and Vandy than towards Tennessee and Ole Miss.
Yeah, and again, it's all about your personnel, right? It's all about your personnel and your identity. But I still think, you look at it's funny. You look at a team like Tennessee, right? That went really, really fast because defensively they weren't great, right? And they felt like they had to outscore you. Well, it's amazing when you got a really good defense, how your offense starts to get slower and slower and slower and slower. So I think a lot of it just depends on the identity of the team. And is it one of those situations where you're like, hey, our defense is really good. We don't need to go fast because the defense doesn't need to be on the field for 100 plays a game if it's not working on offense. So I think a lot of it just kind of depends on what you are defensively. I don't think enough people talk about that as much and how much that affects how fast that you go on offense. And depth is a big thing too. You would love to have the best of both worlds to say, hey, we're really good on defense and we're deep. The best way we can move the ball is by going fast. So why don't we do both? Well, again, I'll use the Tennessee example. You weren't great offensively, and you were a running team when you look at it. So, circumstances dictate outcomes. So I'll be interested to see kind of the progression of that as we continue.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Jake Crain from Crain & Company, nice enough to join us today. Jake, what do you got going on this week, bud?
Oh, man, everything. We're talking college football, college basketball. Ole Miss ranked. I know it hadn't been great the past couple of games, but, what a time to be alive in SEC basketball. Obviously, talking about the Super Bowl. We're going to live stream that as well, talking recruiting, taking your live calls 2 to 3:30 p.m. Central. So, yeah, come hang out with us. If you like this show, you're probably going to like ours.
All right, Jake, man. Take care, bud, and thank you very much.
Anytime, Stevie. Keep killing it, buddy.